All right, I'm going to tell you 6 reasons why I think you need to be buying laundry equipment right now. And the number 6 reason is something that I've never heard anyone else talking about. And it's something that I think is huge that you need to be considering, maybe not even necessarily only in your business or your laundromat business, but you might need to be considering that in a multiple avenues of your life. So you're not going to want to miss number 6, but let's jump into it with number 1 first. That was a little clickbaity, but I genuinely believe this. Number 6 is a big deal. So let's jump into it. Number 1. And number 1 is new shiny things attract fish and they attract people, right? We are attracted to new equipment, shiny. It's going to be reliable. And it's just a more pleasant experience to do an unpleasant chore when you're doing your laundry in shiny, new, clean equipment. Right. So when you put in new equipment into your store, it's going to attract new customers, obviously, but also that should lead to some more reviews, some more positive reviews online, some more positive word of mouth. Hey, did you see the laundromat down the street? They got new equipment. You should check it out. It should attract even more customers and keep that snowball rolling. More customers means more revenue for you, obviously, as the business owner, but it also means that you can serve more people in your community through your laundromat. So, number 1 reason for buying new equipment is to be able to serve more people, attract new customers, create more revenue that way. Okay, let's talk about number 2. Number 2 is the availability of financing right now and the financing terms that are available. So right now, 2021, laundromats they've gotten a little bit better of a name than we've had in the past. And a big part of that is because as disaster struck our world, people looked around and saw stores shuttering their windows left and right. But you know who was open still? Laundromats. Laundromats were essential and they stayed open by and large throughout the country, throughout all of the turmoil of the last year and a half plus, right? So that has put a lot of stock in laundromats. And so they're a stable business, they're a simple business, they're an essential business. And because of that, financing is more readily available than it has been in the past. And even in the past, financing for laundromat equipment has been pretty available. And as you probably know right now, interest rates are at an all-time low. So it's a great time to lock in a low interest rate on equipment. So, whether that be you're getting 100% equipment financing or you're financing, with a 20% down payment or 30% or whatever the case may be for you, getting financing is easier than it's been in a while. And not only that, it is, at a great historic low rate still to this day right now. So if financing is something that you're interested in, I do have a couple of great resources. Shoot me an email at jordan@laundromatresource.com. That email is down below in the description. I can do an email introduction to you and a couple of great laundromat specific lenders who know this business, who are going to make sure that you are making the right call by putting new equipment into your store. So shoot me an email if that's something you're interested in. I'd be glad to make an email introduction for you guys. Okay. Financing, availability and terms, the number 2 reason right there. Let's talk about number 3. The number 3 reason that it might be a great idea right now to buy new equipment, to retool your store, is utility cost savings, right? When you buy new equipment, you're buying the latest technology, you're buying the efficiencies that have developed over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, however old your equipment is, right? You're buying those efficiencies, and those efficiencies will cause your utility usage to go down. So machines now are not using as much water as they used to. They're not using as much electricity as they used to. Dryers aren't using as much gas as they used to. Even if you're upgrading your boiler or tankless water heater, whatever system you're putting in, those efficiencies will save you money also, and you can also finance those. So now is a great time to save on utilities, as utility costs all over the place are still on the rise, and they're pretty volatile, but generally they're volatile in an upward trajectory, right? Prices keep going up. So it's a great time to be saving money on utilities. And remember that the value of your laundromat, how much money your laundromat is worth, is determined by the net operating income, which is your total income minus your expenses. So if your total income is here and your expenses are here, when your expenses go down because you're saving money on utilities, guess what? The value of your laundromat goes up. So not only are you saving money, which means more money in your pocket every single month, but you're also increasing the value of your laundromat. And that is putting money in your net worth bucket right there. So utility cost savings, number three great reason to consider upgrading your equipment. Let's talk about number four. Number four is vend price increases. When you upgrade equipment, it gives you a great opportunity to increase your vend prices. And, I think people expect to pay more. If you've got 30-year-old dryers in there and you throw in some nice shiny new ones, they're probably going to expect that it's going to cost a little bit more. It's new. You just spent a lot of money on this equipment, right? Or you financed a lot and you're going to be spending a lot of money over time on this equipment. So people expect to pay more, and the experience is a little bit more pleasant. So you're offering them more value, and people are willing to pay more for a more valuable experience, right? So one of the things that I tell my coaching clients, in fact, I just had a conversation with a coaching client a couple of days ago who was considering putting used equipment in. And I said, hey, you know what? Just, devil's advocate here. What if you put in new equipment? Do a calculation, see how much it's going to cost you. How much is your monthly payment going to be when you finance it? And go see if you raise your vend prices by a quarter or 50 cents or $1, whatever you think you can raise it by putting in new equipment into your store. Go see if you don't attract any new customers and you don't save on any other utilities, you just increase by a quarter or 50 cents. What is that going to do to your revenue? If everything else stays the same, how much more money are you going to be bringing in compared to your payment? Now, ideally, you're shooting for your revenue to increase more than your monthly payment. And if that's the case, it's a no-brainer to put new equipment in, right? Nothing else, none of these other reasons even really matter. If you put in new equipment, your payment's going to be $3,000. And, just by raising your vend prices alone, you're going to be bringing in $3,500. That's an extra $500 a month. It's a no-brainer. You should do that every single year almost, right? You can't do that obviously every single year, but it's a no-brainer. But even if it gets you even or close to that, some of these other reasons should push you over the edge. So do a calculation. What if you raised every machine in your store, or if you took out a bunch of top loaders and you put in some larger machines, and the increase in income from these larger machines can make up a lot of income. So just something to think about. It's not always cut and dry. It's cheaper, yes, to buy used equipment, but can you really raise your prices the same way? Are you getting the utility if you replace your 30-year-old equipment? Are you getting utility savings by putting in 15-year-old equipment? Maybe not though. Okay. So that is number, I think 4. Is that what we're on? 4? I can't remember now. All right. Let's talk about, I think, number 5, which is tax write-offs. Now, I'm not a tax professional. This is not advice. So go talk to your CPA or your accountant about this, or just, go read the tax code yourself. If that's, you love reading the tax code, that's all you. Go do it. Whatever the case may be, find out for yourself. But you can depreciate your machines over time, which means the government is acknowledging basically that over time your machines become used and they lose some value. So you can count that as an expense, as a loss to your business, which is not a real loss, right? You still bring in the same amount of money and you still spend the same amount of money. But let's say you bring in $10,000 and you spend $8,000, your net income is that $2,000, but you can depreciate your machines and that gives you another $2,000 a month worth of depreciation. So essentially on your taxes, it shows that your income is $10,000 and your expenses is $10,000, but you still get that $2,000 of cash flow right there, if that makes sense. So again, talk to your accountant and CPA and ask them about bonus depreciation, which means you can take more of, generally speaking, when you depreciate over a set period of time in equal parts. But bonus depreciation allows you to take a larger portion, sometimes all of it, but a larger portion of it up front in the first year that you buy the equipment. So huge perk of buying equipment is this tax write-off, which I think people don't put enough weight in. That can be a really, really big deal. And in fact, so much so that kind of unintentionally for a little while, but for the past 7 years, every single year, I have made some sort of purchase, whether that be new equipment, whether that be some real estate, because you can depreciate stuff with real estate also, or a new laundromat, whatever the case may be. I've made some big purchase every single year, which has made a huge impact on my tax returns, And in fact, that's how a lot of wealthy people are paying less and less taxes, sometimes no taxes, even though they're millionaires or billionaires. Maybe not billionaire. I mean, maybe, I don't know actually. But even people who are mega wealthy, the way that they don't pay taxes, one of the ways they don't pay taxes is they buy stuff that they can depreciate over time. So they're actually making money, but legally, and I'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt, legally, they're showing either much smaller gains than they're actually making, or sometimes no gains, but they're actually bringing in money. But because of the depreciation, it shows on taxes that they're not. So look more into that. Talk to your CPA, go read the tax code, whatever floats your boat in that way. But find out more about that because that's a huge perk. But let's jump into number 6, because number 6 is one that I haven't heard anybody else talking about. And this is an argument for buying new equipment and financing it, and financing as much of it as possible, 100%. If possible, even more than that, if possible, 110%. Sometimes you can get, if possible, right? Get financing. And in fact, I'm looking for more and more debt right now. And let me tell you why. And let me tell you why that this is not just for your business for new equipment, but it may mean that you might need to look for more assets to buy. Now, here's one of the things that I've been seeing lately and hearing a lot about lately. If you go on my YouTube channel, I watch a lot of real estate investor channels. I watch a lot of, stock investor, fund managers, a lot of wealthy people or channels about wealthy people or corporations and what they're saying and what they're doing. And I was talking to my wife the other day and I was like, you know what? Everything is so complex and complicated and everybody has an opinion, but really you can cut through all of that and shortcut your learning curve by watching what the most wealthy and powerful people are doing and emulating that on whatever scale that you can emulate that, right? So I'm watching, what is the government doing? Oh, I'm watching, what is the Fed doing? The national banks, the reserve banks, what are they doing? I'm watching what are big corporations doing? I'm watching what are hedge fund managers doing, because I want to see, they're the ones putting millions and millions of dollars into learning what they should be doing with money, because that's what they deal with, right? And I don't have millions and millions of dollars yet to be putting into that. So what I can do is benefit from their experience to some extent and their research to some extent and emulate what they're doing, right? Okay, so what does this have to do with buying new laundromat equipment? Well, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of speculation, and again, this is somewhat speculation, but it seems to hold a lot of weight from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, is we are experiencing higher rates of inflation right now. Okay. And what inflation does is it makes the dollar worth less and less and less, right? So when you've heard, I realize most of you guys probably understand inflation, at least on some level. But when you hear, that houses back in, your grandparents' age, day were, $25,000. And yeah. And while that's still comparatively cheap to what they are now, because housing prices to some extent and in certain places have exceeded the rate of inflation. In some ways, the gap seems way, way bigger than it actually is. And you'll see inflation adjusted prices, which means, the dollar back then was only worth about 40 cents now, or whatever the case may be, right? And what a lot of people that I follow are expecting is for that rate of inflation to increase. Now, I don't want to get too political or too far down the rabbit hole, but there's a national inflation rate that is reported every year. And I just want to point out, I'll put a video link actually down below if you want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more about why that inflation rate is not really to be trusted. There's some really good reasons as to why that rate is probably lower and maybe even much lower than the actual rate of inflation. You can watch the video down below, and I'll link to it there about the inflation rate that's posted. But the point is that inflation is in my estimation likely to increase. Now, why does that mean you should go out and look for debt, right? Well, think about it. Think about let's go back to our grandparents who bought their $25,000 house, or let's even just say it's $100,000 mortgage on a house from 20 years ago or 30 years ago, right? Well, their payment is going to be, it's going to be laughable now. Maybe they have a $400 a month mortgage payment, right, on their thing, which, back then maybe was not laughable. Maybe it was still relatively low compared to now, but it was not laughable. But now it's laughable. And the reason for that is because as inflation has gone 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever, every single year, what that's done is made the value less and less valuable. And so $400 then, it's been eaten away at inflation every single year since whenever they bought that house. And now $400 is not the same $400 as it was back then. Right. Okay. So that's why if you may have heard the famous Robert Kiyosaki say, savers are losers. And that seems like a really harsh thing to say. So if you're somebody, this is how my wife and I were when we first got married for, I don't know, maybe like 10 years or 8 years or something. We prided ourselves. We were good savers. We had money in the bank and we saved. That's what we were taught. And that's what we did. Right. But Robert Kiyosaki came along and said, hey, people who save money are losers. Right. And what did he mean by that? What he meant by that is that, let's say you have an awesome bank account. I have an online bank account and it gives me 1%. It's awesome, right? Like, wow, I made like $11 last month. Awesome, right? On interest. Well, compared to my, big bank, my Chase Bank or whatever, that gives me, I don't even know, like 0.1, probably even less than that percent of interest. Sometimes I have to pay them. I don't know. 1% sounds great, but consider inflation, right? So if I make 1% of money every single year on my money that's in the bank account. So let's just make it really easy on my simple mind, right? So we have $100,000 in the bank. Well, if I keep it in that 1% account, I'm going to make $1,000 that year just for letting money sit there, right? 1% of 100,000, that's 1,000, right? It is. Oh man, I should have made it even simpler. So we made $1,000, but because of inflation, let's be very conservative and just say it's 2%, which is probably a lot higher, but let's call it 2%. Well, you've actually lost 1% of your purchasing power that year, even though you have an extra $1,000 in your bank account. Well, that flips on its head when you take out a loan, when you have debt, right? So he says savers are losers because if you put your money, you save your money and you put it in a bank account, you're actually losing money every single year. You're losing purchasing power of your dollar is going down every year more than the interest you're making. Now, if you're making 10% in your bank account and inflation was 3%, you're still golden because you're making 7%, right? But because interest rates at the bank are below the rate of inflation, you're losing money every single year. Okay. Now, when you take out a loan, especially a long-term loan, the longer the term, the better. What you're doing is you're saying, okay, month one, I take out my loan. Let's say my payment is $1,000 a month for 10 years, right? Well, month one, year one, I'm paying the $1,000 a month for today's dollars, right? Well, year two, inflation has come in, and can we please just make it really easy? This is going to sound a little more extreme, but I just want to make it really easy on myself. And we'll call it 5% inflation, right? Oh, that, you know what? That's not even that easy for me. I don't know the math off the top of my head, but you'll get the point. Okay. So, inflation comes in and eats away at the value of the dollar. So I'm still paying $1,000 a month, but the value of the dollar is less. The purchasing power is less. So that $1,000 is easier to pay off because really I'm paying more like 95 cents. Okay. Now, the next year, inflation is eaten away at at the dollar again. And so now I'm still paying the $1,000 a month, but that dollar or that $1,000 is, did I say 95 cents? 900. Well, okay. You get what I'm saying. Okay. That dollar is 95 cents. So so now I'm paying more like $950 year two. It feels more like $950 than $1,000 because inflation is eaten away. Okay. This is an extreme example and not realistic. Maybe. I don't know. Right. So year three, inflation is eaten away again. And now I'm looking more at like $925,000 feel, even though it's the same $1,000 payment, inflation is eating away at the value of that. So it becomes easier and easier and easier to pay off. And the longer the loan you get, the easier it is to pay it off every year because inflation is going up. So you're raising your vend prices, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that is why it could be a really, really great time to be buying new equipment for your business, but also to be financing that and financing it as much as possible, because over time, it's going to be easier and easier to pay that equipment off for your business. Right now, what I'm hearing a lot of is that the rate of inflation, it's kind of on the brink here. And a lot of smart people are thinking that inflation rates are going to rise. Now, hopefully we don't cross over into hyperinflation where, we're printing $1 trillion bills to go buy milk or something like that. But the higher the rate of inflation, the better off you are with debt. Okay. Because it becomes easier and easier to pay that debt off. Right. So just this morning, I did not succeed, sadly, but I tried to buy a house in Hawaii, which had another offer in it, in a backup cash offer, unfortunately. But I tried to buy a house in Hawaii because I started thinking, you know what? Where else can I get some debt right now? Because if inflation does continue to go up, then it's going to be wise for me to lock in as much long-term, smartly. You don't want to over leverage yourself, but smartly, get some long-term debt. So I just bought new equipment for my store, and I'm looking for other places to lock up long-term, low interest debt right now, just as obviously as a hedge for inflation, but also, to bet that inflation is coming. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is betting that inflation is coming. And the main reason that I'm doing that is, one, I'm looking around, I'm looking at lumber prices, I'm looking at drywall prices, I'm looking at all these things, and they're skyrocketing through the roof right now. Whether that's going to keep going or not, yet to be seen. But I'm looking at that and I'm seeing inflation happening rapidly in certain arenas right now. And number two, I'm looking around at what are the big corporations doing? What is, the US doing, right? So this is going to get a little bit bigger than what I intended, but this is kind of an interesting picture, right? So the US, we have this huge national debt, and there's only, and we have promises out, unfulfilled promises for trillions of dollars of spending that we haven't even spent yet, but there's promises to spend that money, right? So the national debt's continuing to rise at rapid rates. Now, we don't have a lot of options as to how we're going to pay this debt off, right? We can either raise taxes, but even if we raise taxes, we will never be able to pay off the amount of debt that we've promised off just by raising taxes. It won't happen. It's too much. Even if we taxed everybody at 100%, I think our gross, our GDP, gross domestic product, is like 20 trillion, and we have something like 160 trillion, something, don't quote me on those numbers, but something like that, something ridiculous promised out there. It will never happen by raising rates. So the best thing the government can do is inflate our debts away, make it easier for us to pay down our debts, right? And because we have this fiat currency, and because we are at the reserve currency of the world right now, we can print money and inflate our debt away. So that's what we're doing. So when you take out debt, you're aligning yourself with what the lawmakers are doing for our country, right? And I'm watching fund managers who are betting that inflation is coming. So they're betting against, they're betting that things inflation is going to continue to go up to make money. And when you're looking at corporations, they're taking out more and more debt to do things like invest back in their business, buy back stock, all that stuff, right? Because they're betting that it's going to make more sense for them to take out debt and let inflation erode that debt over time and be more profitable that way. Okay. Now that is a lot to take in, and a very, very short version and very simplified version of all of this, but I did go down some rabbit holes I didn't intend to go down. So sorry about that. But I wanted to kind of get you thinking about this and get you thinking about what's happening in our world, what's happening in our country right now, and how does that affect you as a small business owner? Okay, this is so important that we're thinking about these things and how it affects us as small business owners, because a lot of times it can feel so remote. What the government's doing. The numbers are so $1 trillion. I can't even wrap my head around, right? It just doesn't make any sense to me, especially as a small business owner who's scratching away in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of income a year, right? Like that trillion does not even make sense. And yet it does affect us. And there are ways that we can prosper and that we can profit if we keep our eyes open and see what's happening around us and what the people who are making the rules, so that's the government, that's the Federal Reserve Bank, what they're doing in order to align ourselves with it and profit from that, right? So taking out debt, that's number 6 reason why you might want to consider buying new equipment as a bet that inflation will be going up. And I say bet, it's not a bet, it's not like going to Vegas. Okay. It's, but you are betting on that, and it may not go up, but all signs seem to indicate inflation is here to stay. It's been here for a long time. It's staying, and all signs in my eyes seem to indicate that inflation will likely rise. And so you will benefit by taking out smart debt. Don't over leverage yourself, but take out smart debt. All right. Hope you guys found that helpful. I would love to hear what you think about this down in the comments. It's kind of interesting, especially about the inflation part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think inflation is going to rise? Do you think it's smart to take out debt? Do you think it's not smart? There's a lot of people who are anti-debt. So I'd love to hear what you think and your opinion, and whether you think it's a good time to buy equipment or not, and why. All right, guys, we'll see you down in the comments. We'll see you at laundromatresource.com. We'll see you on the Laundromat Resource podcast. We'll see you all over the place. We're on Instagram. We are on Facebook, but our account got hacked and they won't give it back to us. So if you're on Facebook looking for me, I will not be there because they won't let me. Facebook, give me my account back. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. Go out there and make a difference in your communities and make sure you're taking action. That's what's going to get you where you want to go. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next whatever forums. Go check out the forums. Go over there and ask a question right now. Go talk about inflation. Laundromat Resource.